Growing up, I drank the Kool-Aid of my parents' and community's beliefs. I made that belief system more important than my own needs and happiness. Looking back, I can't fault anyone for that, not even quote-unquote God. I now have clarity in decisions and choices I make. I'm fully engaged in finding joy in my life, in my own way, without the influence and construct of others. This is an uplifting discussion from there to now.
One. Oh, there's my microphone. We haven't done this for 4 months, and man, does it seem like it's been eons. But then not, because I was just just dictating exactly how I wanted my things to be done. It's like, welcome back, Heather. Today I have David Tanner with us, and we're going to be discussing alchemy, and he is a true alchemist, actually. And I'm so grateful that our paths have crossed so randomly. I think it was about 4 years ago. And he actually is a herbal mineral formulating dude who has a business in this for the last 30 years. And basically what you're doing every day in your, what would you call it?
Our lab.
Your
our
lab.
Alchemy lab.
Your alchemy lab, where you are formulating
Yes.
and alchemizing things. And so your business is called the Red Rock Naturals.
Right.
And I've actually used some of your products. In fact, we were just talking about my lymphatic system. I got a lymphatic massage done, and I could feel my body really like detoxing and like releasing and shedding. And then I have the formula that you made for Lymph Clear. So I've just been incorporating that with it. And so I'll be going back in 3 weeks for another lymph massage. But your products are fantastic. You have given me really fantastic samples. And when I first met you and you told me all of your extensive knowledge in alchemy, I was just, again, extremely grateful to have met you, because I had started a business called The Alchemy Guide, where I coach people on spiritually and physically transforming their lives and what that looks like and how does that feel for everyone. And it's such a unique journey. And so I wanted to bring you on so we could just clarify, what does alchemy even fucking mean? Because there's a guy I'm dating right now and he was like, alchemy. That is such a widely used word now, and it's starting to become more of a trend word. And he's like, what does it actually even mean? Like, does anyone even know what it means? I do. I've researched it. I've read all of the ancient texts and all of the stuff that where it originally originated. I even had a debate with my brother. I was like, alchemy came before chemistry. No, it didn't. And I'm like, it did. And so anyways, I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to let you talk. How did you get into alchemy?
Well, a real quick little snapshot history of that. I grew up with a mother who was a kitchen herbalist. So she was an alchemist in her own right. Her and her sisters would do formulas for Dr. John Christopher, who's considered the father of modern herbalism in the Western United States. So it's been around me my whole life. Mm-hmm. Years later, professionally, I was a department buyer at BYU Bookstore and had access to that huge BYU library. To my surprise, when I got in there and started studying a little bit more about herbalism and minerals, because of the upbringing, my curiosity started to grow, and I wanted to understand the histories and so forth. And I got into the library and was actually blown away at how much recorded information, old texts and books and diaries and so forth that are contained there outside of the religion box, talking about the histories of ancient cultures and how they used alchemy.
That's fascinating. Where are some of the books? Are there any that stand out to you particularly?
Well, I've been through so many books in the last 30 years that it's kind of hard to pick one or two or half a dozen out. At least at that point, since I didn't really identify a specific book, I was more drawn to the role of the history that I was being exposed to. Mm-hmm. And once I gained a little bit of an insight that this term alchemy has been floating around in our humanity for a very long time, as you know, Heather.
Right.
And I was drawn to want to understand what that really meant. And so we can start out maybe with a ancient, but it's a broad definition, which today causes a little confusion. But the original meaning behind alchemy was all God's chemistry. Mm. Now that's a pretty big stick, because when you stop and take a look or a view that really God, regardless of what religion you're in, we all have to recognize that he's the grand chemist. Mm-hmm. It is science. Spirituality equals science in the greater domains. So our job is to understand that better and connect those dots, and that's what I was up to. And a couple of things took place in my career that shifted me away from that profession into making herbal and mineral formulas. And, of course, that deepened the interest to how do I plug in alchemy. So let's start with just a couple of simple explanations of what this alchemistry can perhaps mean. Mm-hmm. By going back to the old cultures that go back thousands of years, and what they did back then is they would come together in groups, and they would observe nature very, very closely. And during that observation, they would experiment with what was available in nature to help them be healthy, happier, better type of lifestyle, even though the cultures were simple. Mm-hmm. So through that observation, and of course, they knew the meaning of meditation really well back then. So they would sit quietly, tune in to the vibes of nature, to the plants, to the elements, to see if they could gain a bit greater understanding of what that's all about. And out of that observation, we discover that they had these shamans, these special spiritual people, alchemists, if you will, that learned the whole role of nature and what happens there. And so basically it comes down to alchemy, and you mentioned it a few moments ago. Alchemy is really about the transition or the transmutation of either an element in nature, which includes plants, herbs, trees, water, so forth, a transition from a certain condition or state of being or energy frequency to a greater one. And so as they began to observe that, and as they experimented with that, nature showed them how to take these elements through certain processes and awaken its greater potential. So if we're looking at elements in nature or the human body, because we're made up of those, so really on one hand, we can kind of pull them apart just to give us a better understanding, but on the other hand, they're one and the same. Mm-hmm. And so as we consider an element, and for our example now, we'll talk about minerals for a minute. So minerals exist in nature in a certain state, and the frequency that they're in, that we may just simply go out and find them, dig them up, we're observing it in that particular frequency or energy and what it is that combined in those elements that make it what it is. But also hidden in every single element in nature and within us as human beings is the seed of potential. And at this point, really all of us are functioning on a certain level that we are with a potential that's much greater than we are. And so the goal in alchemy was to either take an element or the human body.
Or an energy.
And the human body, I'm talking about both physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Yes. Yeah. And improve on that, to find that seed, to release its potential. Mm-hmm. So when you look at the old history of the old alchemists, a lot of what they were recording and doing had to do with the elements, as I had indicated earlier, to find the best part of the plant or the best part of the mineral to help them heal. But at the same time, they recognized by doing that, that was also releasing the potential within their own body. So today, as you mentioned, that's all been pulled apart, and alchemy's been plugged into so many places and definitions and so forth, it does get a little confusing. But if we synthesize it back down to the simple part of it, anything that exists in a certain state can be improved upon by finding the seed of potential and figuring out how to take it through a process to release that potential into its greater capacity.
Okay, I love this. So there are 7 steps in alchemy, which I
Yes.
think the number 7 is extremely significant of its own. Then when you look back at the ancient texts of alchemy, there's also this beautiful myth about the philosopher's stone.
Yes.
And so let's just touch on that, because I feel like alchemy and the philosopher's stone almost kind of go hand in hand in a lot of ways. And this is where a lot of the wizardry came from, where some of our like mythological things about a wizard over a pot, like stirring it and then
Right.
coming up with like gold or some like ore that is like precious and amazing that came from something that was lead.
Yeah. Okay. And that's at the heart of alchemy. And that's what drew me in the most when I initially started into those studies. Now, of course, I was wanting to improve upon the possibilities of herbal medicines and trace minerals as a whole and so on. But coming back down to that, what the old alchemists learned through their observations, meditations, spiritual guidances, ancestral guidances, wherever you want to plug in your definition of the other side, they got the help, they got the vision. And they learned that they had a saying in old alchemy, and they said that all elements in nature covet the frequency of gold. So that was a very trigger point for them to go, okay, how can we transmute an element all the way down to lead, which is a very, kind of a basic, heavy
Element.
Element. It has its purpose in that state, of course. We use lead all the time in many applications in our world. But they sensed that lead, if it was taken through these 7 steps of alchemy, could ultimately transition into actually pure yellow gold. Now, they accomplished that, and during those processes, they're chemical, and when they started going through that, the idea was we're going to accelerate nature's own processes. That was the idea. It's like going from coal to a diamond. It's that same concept. And so they recognized that under certain conditions in a laboratory setting, even though they were simple, that they could get these elements to transition and actually could, over a period of time, convert lead into gold. Now, once they accomplish... Oh, and by the way, in modern-day science, in quantum mechanics, they've actually copied and have proven that concept to be correct.
That's fascinating and super cool.
Yeah. Now, during those old times, it took quite a while for them to figure it out, because if they didn't keep a balance through those 7 steps, they created toxic environments, and some of those poor alchemy students keeled over in the lab. So
Here we laugh about it.
I know, right? Oh, my goodness. Well, I've had a whiff of some toxic materials as I have attempted such processes. Thank goodness I didn't keel over. But anyway... once they achieved that goal, they then recognized, and this is where we're coming down to this philosopher's stone that you were talking about, they discovered that if you could exert a certain energetic frequency or energy onto the gold itself, the gold would let go of one electron in its in the atomic structure, the orbit. It would let go one of those electrons out into the space, and when it would do that, it would change from a metallic compound to a crystalline compound. And then they would get it down to a powdery state. So they called it the white powdered gold. And again, this same process has actually been proven in modern science. A guy by the name of David Hudson was the one that discovered that. That's a whole story in and of itself, but he was the one that brought forward this concept that we can get yellow gold into this white powdered gold, or this frequency that's beyond the metallic compounds.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's a real cool part about this. In a very well-known lab in California, they discovered a relationship between this crystalline material and DNA function. And they began the research by they took a short strand of DNA and they placed a few particles of one of the noble trace minerals called ruthenium,
Mm-hmm.
which is in that same group as gold. And they discovered that short strand of DNA required a few particles of ruthenium at its base. And the job of the ruthenium was to send electrical pulses into the helix of the DNA, which really kind of looks like a wiring system, if you will. It's that twisted ladder-looking thing that's got all the steps for amino acids are created in there. The codon space is what they call it. And anyway, they discovered that these ruthenium would send 10,000 pulses into the helix, and these pulses were coded messages of what the DNA is supposed to do. It's instructional. So not only is it instructional, but it's high in its frequency. So they measured 10,000 pulses per time sequence, and it was seconds. They then took the ruthenium through a little alchemic process, got it to give up one electron, so it went from ruthenium in a colloid metallic state to a crystalline state. And immediately it began to release up to 1 million electron pulses, from 10,000 to 1 million. And the helix got so excited, and it couldn't handle that much of an electrical charge. So in the space around the double helix, there's a dormant space where there's a potential of 10 more. It started sending a message out to those other 10, fire up, because we're going to get fried if you don't. Mm-hmm. And so we got this piece of science that shows what the old alchemists claimed, that once they got the gold to this white powder material and ingested it, it would turn the body into an immortal body, free of disease, pain, and all the things that we're subjected to right now in this third-dimensional frequency existence that we live in today.
Right.
So, having said all that, then they began to recognize that as elements would go through a process, their body and spirit was following along with it. Mm-hmm. And over a little time, the discovery, and this is where things got confused today, but they discovered two very interesting correlating components here. The 7 steps that you were talking about and that I've mentioned to evolve the elements correlated with the 7 energy centers in the human body that we call chakras that govern the endocrine system. So it's the kind of thing that if people can just sort of keep in mind, alchemy is about, as we've mentioned, the transition or the transmutation of an element or a group of elements that are bonded together from one state or frequency to a much higher state and frequency. And when that happens, whether it's minerals out of the earth or out of the herbs or the human body, when that happens, it changes who and what we are to our potential. And, here's the thing, Heather. The quantum DNA scientists today are acknowledging that we're functioning on about 10% of our whole capacity.
Right. I understand
Where's
that
the rest of it?
our DNA hasn't even 100%. I
Right.
think we're like literally functioning on such a minimal amount of our DNA strand, right? And all
Yes.
of that can be activated. We can actually actively activate. There's a lot of active in that word. Our DNA
It's all
to
right.
its highest potential.
Exactly. And I really believe that at this juncture we're in a place now where the frequencies of Mother Earth are shifting.
Right.
And more people are beginning to recognize that, and more the quantum physicists and scientists are saying, hey, whoa, we've got something really big going on here on our planet.
And doesn't that relate to the Schumann resonance as well?
Yes, absolutely.
So that is a huge reflection of the shift. And really, I was just like, I follow a lot of astrologers, and they're all saying that we are really shifting. This is the time now where we are shifting into more of a 5D type of world.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree with that. And when we
if we allow ourselves.
Yes. And when we talk about the word 5D or fifth dimension that Mother Earth is going into, most of us, us and those in the, that are hearing and listening to us, we called that the millennium, growing up in religion. And really, it's just another way to describe the fifth dimension is kind of a little more of a scientific explanation of what millennium really is.
Right. It's more of a energetic or frequency type of definition, would you say?
Yes.
I was just actually texting your wife yesterday about frequencies, and that there are certain frequencies that can help you lose weight. There's certain frequencies that can help you balance your body and identify. And then I saw really that lymphatic massage lady had an app on her phone where you can actually talk into it. It reads your frequency, and then it tells you the things that you're deficient in, and then it creates a frequency to help you correct that.
Exactly.
And so there's so many resources and tools out there for this beautiful transformation to aid us on a physical and spiritual level.
Right. And, as we become more aware, especially in the scientific community, which is exciting because, there was such a great separation, in our past between, excuse me, between religion and science. And as I mentioned earlier, really they're one and the same. It's just our lack of understanding kept it separate.
Right.
So now as we're beginning to understand that better, plug it in, and recognize that the divine ones use alchemy all the time for their creations, the evolution of those creations, and here we are in the middle of ours. Mm-hmm. And one of the real cool things about this that you mentioned about this big frequency change that's coming, a little closer look at the Schumann resonance, and there's a particle that the quantum physicists have now identified as the photon particle. And that photon particle is the smallest thing for us to observe, or one of the smallest things for our observation in science today. But it's so full of light that even the quantum physicists are saying, "Oh, this is the Christ particle. This is the creation particle," and it's very, very fine. And one of the really fascinating pieces in this is there's actually a photon belt that exists in our universe that our little solar system is penetrating into. Now, I would look at that as a scientific definition as this is our millennial move. That's the light that's coming in, and it's coming through our sun. Mm. And so every time we have a solar storm
or solar flare,
it's bombarding us with higher levels of photon particles, which then gives us a scientific description of these particles are preparing us for this fifth dimensional frequency.
Call it neutrinos.
Yes, that's
because
one of the descriptions.
Right, because it's almost like a nutrient. So it's so fascinating that we're told to shield ourselves from the sun and stay away from the sun. And oh my God, put chemicals on you to protect yourself from the sun. Where in reality, with moderate doses, you want to be in the sun.
Absolutely,
you need those nutrients that you're getting from it.
Right, and we really can't expose ourselves to a lot of sunlight, especially in the earlier hours of the day and the later hours of the day. And even in the old science description and what they were saying is the sun can cause a lot of skin cancer and so on. They're changing their mind about that. They're finding,
No surprise.
it's not causing as much of a problem as we thought.
Right.
Of course, anything in excess can knock things out of balance for us. But the reality is, we need that good sunshine exposure, and it's the natural way for the body to absorb vitamin D, which is essential for a number of things, and especially good mood.
Exactly. Which I'm sure some of our fellow human beings can attest up way, way, way up north when they're not getting as much sun frequently.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, a few years ago, I was doing some alchemic research for a publicly held cannabis company out of California, and that was a great experience. We learned a lot. And we learned that plant is amazing in its healing properties, and combined with other herbs and minerals, does wonderful things to the human body. We had a client up in the Seattle, Washington area, and we would go up and we would make these big, 5-gallon barrels of liquid salve and then ship it up there, and then we go up and teach them how to add the cannabis to it for a pain reliever. And the first trip we went up there was during their sunny time. Everyone was so happy to see us and so excited to learn the alchemy. And then the next trip we went up and went right into the monsoon season. We couldn't get anybody to even talk to us.
Everyone went into hibernation mode. Okay, so let's... There was one really fascinating tidbit that you told us. That you really got into alchemy, and it was through the books that you found in the BYU library. But this library is not accessible to the open public.
Yeah,
we don't have to dive deep in it.
Right.
Okay,
No.
because there's a whole nother story to that too, which is super fascinating. Then I want to also cut to the... so that just makes us... That it just brings to our awareness there are several libraries of ancient texts and books that are not being shared to the open public and that are not readily available to all of us. And so that is something, food for thought. And you are so lucky to have access to that at that time in your life. Also, we just touched on basically the barely on the Philosopher's Stone. So what is your understanding about the Philosopher's Stone? Because that really goes hand in hand with alchemy, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. So the idea is that once the old alchemists were able to get the gold into this white powder material that we're talking about, it's a crystalline material. And when ingested into the body, it has that same profound impact that we were talking about a few moments ago that big laboratory had discovered with the ruthenium powder. So the idea is that when we introduce into our body a high-frequency crystalline substance, it goes down into the cellular processes, and it's almost like it's a code, because we have all the potential already sitting down in there, it's just dormant and sleeping. So it would go down in there with the correct codes, just like, to turn on a certain software program in a computer, you have to have a code or a password to unlock it. So this is the password, if you will, that unlocks that hidden dormant potential and wakes it up in stages so that we can reach that greatest potential we have. Historically, even just in biblical history, we know that those old patriarchs, lived 1,000 years. And now, on a personal level, I believe humans have been on this planet for a lot longer than 6,000 or 7,000 years that religion teaches. We've been down here a long time.
Right.
But there are certain societies that had this material available to them and could live
forever.
Yeah.
Like Saint Germain is rumored.
Yes. So they become immortals. They became the true philosophers or teachers or the wisdom makers or the wise ones that knew how to take the journey to unlock that great potential. And so sitting down inside the cell, there's old programs that keep that potential down.
Mm-hmm.
So,
like the belief system that we age.
Right.
We actually don't really age, but we believe and we take on that belief that we actually age.
Right.
And then we actually create that physical effect in our body.
Right. Exactly. So as we wake up the greater potential, the great philosopher that's within each one of us, and Jesus told his disciples, he said, the kingdom of God's within you. That's where the magic is. And then he went on to say, the things which ye see me do, go ye and do likewise, and greater things than these shall ye do. The Christian world, I've asked that question to so many people. What does that mean?
Mm-hmm. And they have no idea.
No idea.
Because the sad part is that religion took that and convoluted it and twisted it and distorted it and put it in a box and then put all of us into a box, or at least attempted to. A lot of us have figured out how to crawl out of that box. And then there's other boxes to crawl out of, which is also called Kool-Aid.
Exactly. Well, and you know, we could even jump into a greater discussion, and more people are beginning to recognize that we have had visitors from the galaxy and the universe on this planet for a very, very long time, very enlightened societies that have come here and participated in our human experience. Now, there's some...
Would that be like the Anunnaki?
Yes, ma'am. And if we consider at least that story, then it's very possible that this lockdown in our potential was created when they were messing around with DNA and genetics of human beings. Mm-hmm. And so our goal and our desire in alchemy is to be able to deprogram what they programmed into us to keep us at a certain level.
A stagnant level.
To where they could control our environment and our function in it.
Which I really think is religion and science.
It is.
Yeah,
I would have to agree.
Basically just limits us in all of our beliefs and the fact that we can actually do more and we are capable of more, way more.
Right. Now, as we're learning more and more about the alchemic processes in the human body, one of the great ancient secrets that's now coming into view and in the public domain is this concept of the sacred secretion.
Is that the pineal gland?
It involves the pineal gland, absolutely. The sacred secretion is the entire chemical movement from the brain down the spinal column to the base of the spine and back again, and what that function is doing and how it relates and controls everything in our human dynamic, if you will. So we've learned and been exposed to that there is a little carbon molecule that was placed, a programmed molecule that was placed at the receptor cells in the brain that control genetic function. And so that little carbon cell that sits on those receptor sites, in other words, the communication ports of having the whole body function a certain way, it's what they call methylation. So there's this process that the brain scientists have discovered, that methylation is simply this chemical function from this carbon molecule that's coded or programmed, just like a computer program, that when the genetics receive their instruction and start performing its function, it only lets it go so far, i.e. 10% of our capacity. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that we're really excited about in alchemy is using these alchemic elements as a support tool to dissolve that program, so that as that goes away, then those receptor cells start saying, hey, we can do more. Okay, here's our new instruction gene pool. On the genetics go, Oh yeah. So now we're back into the science of epigenetics, which is relatively new to the sciences, but boy, is it taken the world by storm, with Bruce Lipton and that crew, that they really took this message about epigenetics out into the world. So again, rediscovering our potential, getting the right codes and frequencies into the human body, using the elements that are also supercharged to to remember, to decode the old crap that's held us down and move us into our potential.
So what is the key thing to do that? What are some of the key things that we can do to do that?
Yeah, that's a great question.
That was a good release over there, Sean.
We got to get healthier and sneeze less.
Or is sneezing a really good release? I hear that when you get a runny nose and you're sneezing and you get a cold, you're actually releasing toxins from your body.
Right.
Oh my God, there's toxins everywhere. Oh my God.
I honestly really truly believe that Sean
Right.
is full of lots of toxins. Just kidding. Just kidding.
Well, so to of course, we could spend a ton of time on that question, but basically, it's first of all, my message to people is open yourself up to education, greater possibilities that will, one, get you healthier, happier, more emotionally stable, more mentally centered, and more in tune with your spirit. I grew up in the religion that says they give you the Holy Ghost. Well, the Holy Ghost is our soul. It's with us all the time. And so the idea here is for us to reconnect to our soul vibration, which connects all the way to Creator Source.
Right.
So when we open it up, our soul can kind of help us start identifying things to do to help us to get there. So, number one,
meditate. Go within.
Absolutely.
Shift out of your head into your heart.
Absolutely. And there's a whole new movement now between the heart and mind connection. And that's the beauty. You can go online these days and find all kinds of tools like that one to assist. So you want to spend your time spiritually within. And then you want to take good care of the physical body. Learn more about how it functions and what you can do to assist it on a good, healthy level. And at the same time, because we go through cycles and sometimes the body slows down, we catch a virus, that sort of thing. And then to understand, rather than run to the drugstore for an allopathic medicine, take a little closer look at herbal medicines because it's been around for thousands of years and it works.
Mother Earth provided natural medicines for our body.
Right.
We are not tapping in or utilizing the resources that Mother Earth has provided forever.
Right. And by the way, we don't have the time to go into the discussion of why, but too much right now, but we, in all of our liquid herbal formulas that we do, we combine a full spectrum of trace minerals that
is very lacking.
Very important and very lacking in our diet, and is not available in a lot of medicines. Now, and one real quick thought, the reason I encourage people to, as best as they can, pull back from allopathic medicines, there was a research that was done that showed that allopathic or synthetically lab pharmaceutical formulas, that the molecules in a particular drug medicine, when it gets down and penetrates the cell, it has the reverse light spin to it because it's synthetically made than the natural herbal molecule, which is the correct right spin. And so the cell will, if that's all that's available to it, it'll use it, but then you create a side effect off that left refractory light spin. And it can work quicker for a Band-Aid fix-up, but long-term, we want to be eating the right foods. We want to be supplementing with herbal and mineral supplements, both on a regular basis and when we become sick and need some concentrated elements in the body.
Right. And so when you say eating the right foods, I think of all of the foods that come from Mother Earth in the most wholest
Yes.
form. And then also, too, getting all of the color spectrums into your diet as well from Mother Earth and all of those, greater forms, like the color purple, orange, blue, like yellow, all of those colors getting into your diet, the green, like all of that stuff is super vital for
Absolutely.
our bodies.
Yeah, and here's a fun little insight. The head of the chemistry department at a large university in Utah, we became good friends, and he was on the same path that I was, and we had a great discussion. And he said, David, and this was 30 years ago, he said, the receptor cell sites in the body are designed, if we learn to listen to them, to communicate to us what the body needs in that moment. And he says, for instance, if you walk into a grocery store and go over into the vegetable area and yellow squash is speaking to you, he says that's the receptor site sending the communication to your brain that we need this today. Mm-hmm. So the color, the frequency, we're set up for it. But in our modern society, we have shut down that part of us. And,
Right.
and this is why it's so important for us to get back to inner spiritual work.
Absolutely. So basically, summarizing again, alchemy can transform us in so many ways on a physical and spiritual level. And with my business, I like to try to, with alchemy, focus on the mind, body, spirit, and transforming it and leveling up. And a lot
Absolutely.
of us hit a threshold. And how do we move past that, right? And there's so many resources and tools, as we discussed, to level up, to get, not even to level up, to excel and push past that barrier, past that,
Of course.
that limit that I think a lot of us have put ourselves in.
Yeah, without question. And, and don't beat yourself up, too, if you've kind of hit a level for a little bit, because the body runs in certain circadian type cycles, and sometimes it needs to settle into that spot for a little while for everything to adjust and come back to balance. But we want to keep on that path so that we don't stay there.
Stay stagnant.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so again, you have some amazing products and resources, and I always love coming and visiting your lab. And a lot of it kind of reminds me of walking into my dad's. He's a physician, a holistic doctor, and he has like this room with all of his like cool products and stuff too. And I walk into your lab, and it reminds me of walking into my dad's supplement room.
I love it.
I'm like, oh, this smells like home.
Yeah, I love it. I love it.
And so tell us, how can we find your products? Tell us some of the really cool products you have right now, because
Okay.
you really focus on trace minerals, and you were telling me how you've been really deep diving into resourcing the best trace minerals. And what can we find you on a website? How can we get your stuff?
Okay, thank you, Heather. redrocknaturals.com.
Okay.
That's our website. Currently, most of our products have been being sold wholesale. Mm-hmm. And so we're now doing a little work on the website. It needs a lot of work as we want to now get back into the public domain and exposure with our products and formulas. And so we have a nice handful of products to help people get started with. One of my favorites, I call it Super Mood. And it really is designed to work with the vagus nerve, which the vagus nerve controls the entire nervous system of the body, the parasympathetic and sympathetic function. And most people's vagus nerves are out of balance, damaged, and due to we're so exposed to chemical invasion and negative propaganda and on and on and on. The Kool-Aid.
Oh, yeah.
So this is designed to help bring that back into balance and keep a good, happy mood, that sort of thing. So we have some formulas that are maintenance, and then we also have some specifically for issues like cold and flu and viral stuff. And so just go on and take a look. And behind the scenes now, I'm getting back to really doing some more alchemic research to get all of our formulas to the next level up alchemically.
To match the frequency we're all
Right.
shifting into,
Yes, ma'am.
or hopefully shifting into.
Yes. And real soon we're going to have the trace mineral complexes available on our website. We haven't been making our own for a little while due to some circumstances, but that's changing. And we're going to have them available on our website. In the meantime, if somebody needs a good trace mineral complex, there's a company up in Springville that I recommend, and I use their stuff in my formulas called Organina.net.
What's the best way to reach you? Email?
Yeah, email's fine.
What's your email?
It is wizardslab1@gmail.com.
Is one spelled out?
No, it's the number 1. So it's wizards, plural, lab, the number 1, @gmail.com.
Well, thank you so much. I hope that people reach out to you more with further questions about Alchemy and some of your amazing products. Thank you so much, David, for joining.
Thank you, Heather. It's been a pleasure.
I don't even know why I did not have you on sooner, but thank you. You
It's
were
all
amazing.
right.
This
Perfect
is great.
timing. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the I Drink the Kool-Aid podcast. Join us next time. If you'd like to participate in this discussion, get a hold of us at idrinkthekooladpodcast@gmail.com. Now let me ask you, what flavor of Kool-Aid are you drinking?
This has been a production from a podcast studio.